Well, welcome in, everyone. I'm Jay Smith, this is Evan McDow, and this is Bradley Kendall, and this is After Further Review. And I know we've already had one show this week, Tuesday evening, but we're back in with another show. This time we're going to do some pick'em games for this coming weekend. So, guys, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Tonight we'll be looking at the top 25 matchups for Week 11. First game up on the slate, Friday evening, we've got Washington at Stanford.
Yeah, Washington looking for a little bit of Stanford's looking for some redemption after last year, after they got absolutely thumped by Washington, if I'm mistaken. That's kind of what vaulted Washington in the playoff consideration. Stanford comes in riding high after getting Bryce Love back. Got a win last week. Washington's favored by 6 on the road, but it's going to be a tough test for them. Prediction here: I'm going to go with Washington. I think they right the ship and start to give people a reason to start putting them closer and closer to the top 4.
Yeah, I think Washington's probably the smart pick here, but, I mean, they're only favored by 6. This game's on the road. It's on a Friday night. We've seen how those games go. Stanford likes to play spoiler sometimes, and, you know, a Pac-12 after dark environment, you just never know what could happen. I think Washington's probably the smarter pick here, but just for the sake of being different, and I'm going to go with the upset in our first game here. I'll take Stanford just for the chaos that would ensue with the rest of the weekend.
I feel like that's a great upset pick. I feel like if you're going to pick a game for an upset, I feel like that's a good one to go with. I'm going to go with the Huskies here, just looking at some stats across the board. They're about even when it comes to points per game on the offensive side of the ball. What's really impressed me this year with Washington is their defense. They're only giving up 11 points a game. They're also only allowing 240 yards a game versus Stanford's 400. So the Cardinal defense is not as stout this year as it has been in years past. And I feel like defense is going to show up on the road more often than offense. So I think if the Huskies are able to keep it to a lower scoring game, I think they're still going to be able to pull it out and get this one done. All right, we'll move on to the next game up on the slate. I think we have Michigan State, Ohio State. This is a 12 p.m. kickoff, which is rather early for this kind of game. This one is at Columbus, so it's at the Horseshoe. Who do y'all have in this one?
Well, 12 o'clock kickoff, but as we saw with Michigan State last week, it could be a 5 o'clock kickoff after the Penn State game with a rain delay. So I'm predicting another rain delay. I think in the Horseshoe is going to happen again. And I'm going to go with Michigan State on this one. The amazing thing is, I know not a lot of people trust the FBI. Some people kind of doubt Vegas too. 92% chance that Ohio State wins this game, and it's a 16.5-point line. If you're a bettor, put some money on Michigan State. I'm riding with the Spartans here. I think they continue what they had going last week. Brian Lewerke's been fantastic for them, and I think JT Barrett was just a one-hit wonder against Penn State. That was just kind of a little one-week thing.
After all of the love that you have showered on the Buckeyes the last 2 seasons of this show, all of a sudden you're just dumping them out?
I didn't like them last year.
Really?
Don't put words in my mouth that I didn't say.
I was the Michigan man, and you were Ohio State Buckeyes.
You were the Washington man. Let's not forget that. But I started to believe in him a little more after I saw him actually put together something good in an actual meaningful game, not just against Maryland, Indiana, those kind of teams. But kind of disappointed me last week. They really just rely on him too much. I think it's kind of like Saquon Barkley at Penn State. If he's not playing well, they die by him. So I'm going to go with Michigan State on the road.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad choice at all. And again, another pretty good upset pick there. But I think this could go either way for Ohio State. They could either continue to lick their wounds after getting shellacked by the Hawkeyes last week. So they might let Sparty march in there and come out with a victory that maybe they don't even deserve. But I think Ohio State's going to regroup. I think that I've watched Michigan State enough to know that they're a little bit inconsistent. Their 2 losses to Notre Dame, and I believe the other one was a triple overtime loss to Northwestern. So I think at the end of the day, Ohio State's probably just a little more durable. They got more depth. I'll take the Buckeyes at home, but I think I would probably bet the under. I would imagine this one would stay pretty close.
I think this is going to be a good rebound game for Ohio State. I don't feel like Urban Meyer is going to let them come out flat 2 weeks in a row, especially with how Iowa went last week. They had a huge win, an emotional win 2 weeks ago with Penn State by a point, and then obviously they didn't show up for the Iowa game. But I think they're going to come out strong against the Spartans. This game is at home. Yes, it's a 12 p.m. kickoff, so the fans may not be as into it, but I feel like the team's going to be there and they're going to show up. Their offense, too, has just been incredible. They're averaging 550 yards a game to Michigan State's 400, and I just feel like offensively the Buckeyes have more weapons than the Spartans, and since this game's at home, I got to go with Buckeyes. Next game that we're going to look at, we've got a 12 p.m. kickoff. We got Rutgers visiting Penn State. This would be a rather embarrassing loss, although Penn State has dropped their last 2 games. Do y'all feel like this is a potential trap game, 3 in a row maybe?
It's not. I mean, James Franklin, the reason that he was saying his team couldn't handle the spotlight is just because they hadn't been there before. Now they get to regroup, face a Rutgers team that Let's be honest, 3 out of 4 of their last games they've won. You can't say that very often about Rutgers, so kind of impressive what they're doing up there. But I'm going to go Penn State. I think they're just too talented on the offensive side of the ball. Let's not forget the last 2 games that they did lose were by a combined 4 points. So it's not like they've been struggling at all. Now they have been trying to get Saquon Barkley go a little bit more this game would probably be something I would recommend to James Franklin, but I think they just got too much talent.
Yeah, I think, as well as Rutgers is playing this year compared to some of their, more recent previous years, they're floating right around 500, I think a game under 500 in conference play. So Rutgers playing better football than they're accustomed to, but not good enough to knock off the Nittany Lions. I don't think there's any way that they lose this game. 3 in a row is just not going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Barkley goes for 200+ and 3 touchdowns. I think Penn State's just going to have too much for Rutgers to handle. Like I said, I don't think they're going to drop 3 games in a row, especially to a team like Rutgers. I'll take Penn State handedly.
2 things that I want you all to take away from this matchup. You've got a 2.2% chance for the Scarlet Knights to pull this one out, which I think is rather high. And then the second thing is when you look at their last 5 opponents, the common opponents for Rutgers and Penn State, you've got one team, and that's Michigan. Penn State beat Michigan 42-13. Rutgers lost to Michigan 35-14. So that's pretty much all you need to know about this matchup. I don't think Penn State's going to drop 3. They're going to roll.
But wasn't that Penn State game with Michigan where Wilton Speight got hurt? Or was it the game before that? I'm pretty sure Wilton Speight played.
Speight, I believe, is still out.
Game.
So even for the Rutgers game, he was still out too.
Yeah. I'm saying that Michigan was probably a better team when they played Penn State, which I guess doesn't really help.
Yeah, I mean it was
for
one
Rutgers upsetting
week later. Yeah. So I still don't think
it's still Rutgers.
Nobody here is going to pick the Rutgers.
I think this is a frustration game for Penn State. I think they're going to take out some of the frustrations from the past couple of weeks and the close losses. I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game by 40.
And it's a game that Barkley needs to try and increase his stats.
He does.
For the Heisman voters. He really needs that right now.
Next matchup we got on ABC at 12 p.m. We got Oklahoma State, the Cowboys, and the mullet man Mike Gundy visiting the Cyclones of Iowa State.
Still got to go Oklahoma State here. Iowa State, after they've been a good story all year, but recently they've started to struggle a little bit scoring the ball, and that's not what you want to see going into a game against Oklahoma State, who put up 52 in a loss. I know they can't play a lot of defense. Iowa State, they're going to try and make it like the TCU game where they kind of limit Mason Rudolph, but you can only limit him for so long, and I think eventually it's going to catch up to him. I think Oklahoma State on the road, probably about 2 or 3 touchdowns, I think gets the job done.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the over-under right now, and it's at 60.5, which for a Big 12 game just feels low to me.
Yeah.
Either one of these teams could end up scoring this much. I think Oklahoma State, same thing. They're going to be a little frustrated that they scored so many points and still ended up losing in Bedlam. So I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game by 3 or 4 possessions. I'll take the Cowboys, and I'm hoping it won't be close. But with the Cyclones and how well they're playing this year, and again, one of those teams that likes to play spoiler, kind of on the cusp of being that good, but also not that good enough to beat some of the better teams, ruin their seasons. I don't think it's going to happen. I think I'll take the Cowboys. Mason Rudolph, just too much offense.
I think it's too much offense. I mean, you look at total yards comparison here. You got Oklahoma State averaging almost 600 yards a game. Iowa State is almost averaging 400. But again, there's just such a considerable gap in points per game, even points allowed. I got to say, I'm impressed with Iowa State's defense. They're giving up under 20 points a game. Oklahoma State is averaging almost 30 points a game, 4 touchdowns. Not too good there. But I think at the end of the day, this is going to be an offensive shootout. And if it's an offensive shootout, I think the Cowboys are going to be the first ones on the draw.
I like the pick.
All right, next game we've got at 12 p.m. Yeah, this is a noon kickoff game. We got UConn visiting UCF. Some would say the best team in the state of Florida, although I'm still on the Miami train.
Arguably so, but definitely the best team of the group of 5 right now. They have the best chance right now to get into that New Year's 6 game, and I think they will. I think they're going to keep it going right here. They have one of the most prolific offenses in the entire country, averaging almost 50 points a game. They put up 73 points against Austin Peay.
Austin who?
Austin Peay. Exactly. 73 points, still impressive no matter who you play. I think, if this was a basketball game, I'd maybe be able to pick UConn, but UCF just got a lot to play for. Connecticut's just looking to get to the offseason at this point, so I'm going to go with UCF. Continue to ride them.
Yeah, I'm going to take the UCF as well. I think I read an article earlier today about this game, how it was supposed to be some kind of rivalry. Former UConn coach Bob Diaco, made this whole trophy for this game, called it the Conflict Trophy. There was supposed to be this North-South new conference rivalry, and UCF was like, no, we're not going to do that. So that trophy is lost somewhere. Bob Diaco is now the defensive coordinator in Nebraska, not even the coach of UConn anymore. So despite the fact that this game's supposed to be a rivalry, it's not. I think UCF is going to just keep it rolling here.
Yeah, I think this is just going to be another notch in the win column for the Knights. I don't think this one's really going to be too much of a contest, and I think this will probably be the only top 25 matchup game that I don't at least check the score of at some point in the afternoon, because I think this will be a total blowout.
Be careful, though. UConn did play Memphis tough earlier this year, so Memphis is an 8-1 team. Could see a little scare early on, but we'll see.
Maybe so. Next matchup we got, this is NC State looking to rebound. They are going on the road at BC. Potential trap game. It's going to be chilly up there in Chestnut Hill. Who do y'all have in this one?
I'm really tempted to go Boston College. I've liked what I've seen them in the last couple of weeks. I'm going to go with NC State, though, just because I believe in what Ryan Finley can do. Mm-hmm. If he can recreate what he did in the first half and replicate it over the entire game, I really trust his ability to be able to lead NC State down the field and score. They came within a couple plays of beating Clemson, so we can't forget that. It's going to be close. I'm going to go NC State, though, on the road.
I'm gonna go with Boston College here. I like Steve Adazio. I like what he's doing up there. Boston College is flirting with bowl eligibility right now, sitting at 5-4. I think they could easily get the job done here. NC State coming off 2 tough losses back-to-back to Notre Dame and Clemson. Ryan Finley, as well as he's been playing, you figure he's got to get gassed at some point. And Boston College at home coming off a bye week.
Yep.
I like the Eagles in this one for
That's
the upset.
exactly why I'm going with the Eagles in this one. Their most recent game, FSU, they annihilated the Seminoles, which for them was a huge win. Obviously, we know that FSU is not contending for anything this year, but still for Boston College, when's the last time they can say they beat Florida State by 32 points? NC State has put their heart and soul into their last 2 games with at Notre Dame and then hosting Clemson. I think they're spent, and I think they're going to continue to slide. They're going to drop 3 in a row. I think Boston College gets it done.
Yeah, that would be tough to see NC State already lose 4 games as after we thought they
could
be a sneaky playoff team.
I think if you win, I think if they had won one of the Notre Dame or if they had won either against Notre Dame or Clemson, they're still in that playoff conversation remotely. But losing both of those games, especially with how bad they lost to Notre Dame, I think they're already out.
Yeah, if you're Dave Dorian, go 8-4. You think you could get a lot more out of this year than that.
Yeah, it's going to feel like an empty 8-4.
It is. Yep.
Empty 8-4. Next matchup we have Arkansas. We're going over to the SEC now. Arkansas on the road at LSU in Baton Rouge. Who do you got in this matchup?
A couple weeks ago, I might have picked Arkansas. Maybe a couple years ago, I would have picked Arkansas also. LSU, I liked a little bit what I saw in the game against Alabama. They were able to control the tempo a little bit, kept it to a 24-10 game. So at least able to stay in the game. I think they've rebounded a little bit since their loss to Troy. They've taken out Florida and Auburn since then, and I think Arkansas, just not their year this year. They've been getting killed left and right by all these SEC teams. Barely beat Coastal Carolina last week, so just going to be too much for LSU, I think, at home.
Yeah, as much as I want to like Arkansas and Brett Bielema, they always seem to find 4, 5, 6 losses and ways to let me down. So as much as I would like to think they stand a chance in this game, I'm going to say they probably don't, despite the recent loss to Alabama. I think LSU's playing a lot better than they were a couple weeks ago when they did lose to Troy for their homecoming game. I don't think they're going to let that happen again, where a subpar team marches into Death Valley and wins it on the Tigers' home turf. So I'll take LSU in this one.
This is an LSU team that's beaten Auburn. And that's a big win.
That's probably the sole reason they're in the top 25.
They've had some issues. I know their quarterback, Etling, hasn't been great this year. I think they're going to stick with him for the Arkansas game. But I still think this game's at home for LSU. They're going to be able to get it done. I'd see it probably being between a 2 to 3 touchdown win for them. But, they've looked inconsistent at times, but then they have moments like where they could beat Auburn. And I think the score of that game, it was 27-23, so it was a closer game, but they've still shown that they can win the big ones.
Troy is 7-2, so, it was a loss at home to Troy, but they're still a legitimate team.
Yeah.
They're decent, so. Yeah.
I think this game will be close. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a 1-possession, maybe touchdown, field goal, mid-20s kind of score. I don't think LSU's going to blow them out, but I think it'll be close. But I think
we're all
LSU
going with the Tigers here.
LSU.
Everybody's going with LSU. Yep. Next matchup, we going back to the ACC. We've got Virginia Tech on the road at Georgia Tech. Do you think the Ramblin' Wreck has a chance?
Virginia Tech's a much better team than we saw last week. That was arguably their worst performance we've seen them over the last couple years. It was tough for Fuente and his guys to even get through that week. Georgia Tech, I didn't see enough in that Clemson game. They really got shut down. The option really wasn't going for them. Yeah. So
as it has been in the last few years.
It has, yeah. And they were great to begin the year with the option, but over the last few weeks, Marshall hasn't been able to get anything going. So I'm going to go with Virginia Tech in a close one. I'll go with the Hokies.
I think this could potentially be a disaster for Virginia Tech. We see how Georgia Tech, at least in recent years, again, hadn't been one of those teams that's good enough, but they like to play spoiler, that triple option attack. Some people have a lot of trouble stopping that. And this game being Atlanta doesn't really help the Hokies' chances either. But I don't think Virginia Tech is going to lose this game. I mean, the only games they've lost this year are to two of the top 7 teams in the country, in Miami and Clemson. So I think, this is obviously a must-win for Virginia Tech if you want to have any kind of chance of coming out of the Coastal, which Miami is all but locked up at this point. So for those reasons, I think Virginia Tech needs to win this game, and I think they will. Yeah. So I'll take the Hokies.
I think I'm in the same boat as you, Evan. Looking at the Clemson and the Miami games, and how Bradley talked about this on Tuesday, they fell flat in both of those performances. But it seems to be for the other games, they're showing up. When you're playing Duke, you're playing UNC, you're playing BC, they're able to get it done. I think the triple option could give them some trouble, as it does most teams. But if I'm not mistaken, I think Virginia Tech plays Georgia Tech pretty regularly. So I'd imagine that they've seen it enough now to feel comfortable with it. But I still think at the end of the day, Virginia Tech's going to be able to get it done. I think they'll go back on
Georgia Tech's won the last 2 years, though. So you never know. Could be interesting.
I think it'll be a good game, though.
Yeah.
Very underrated game.
Speaking of a good
looking
game.
forward to it. Yeah, this is one of the marquee ones. We've got this at 3:30 on CBS. First top 10 matchup I believe we've looked at so far today. Georgia at Auburn.
I'm going to go the Dogs, the Georgia Dogs on the road. I've loved what I've seen out of Jake Fromm. I think he's proved enough as a true freshman quarterback to get the job done when the moment becomes really, really big. One key stat for me, the rushing yards allowed. Georgia and Alabama are very, very similar in the way that they structure their defenses, and they really stop the run well. The front seven for Georgia is just stout, only 89 rushing yards allowed per game, and Auburn loves to rush the ball. I think they're going to shut down Johnson and force Jarrett Stidham into a couple mistakes like he was against Clemson. I'll take Georgia. It's going to be close. It's obviously on the road. Jordan Hare's going to be rocking, but I think Georgia slips away out.
Yeah, I can easily see that happening. I mean, Georgia is obviously playing like the best team in the country right now. Fromm and that duo running back of Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, that attack right there. I mean, they're just getting it done, and that defense is nasty. So I could easily see this game getting out of hand very early, very quickly. But for the sake of the chaos, again, that would ensue for maybe Auburn making a potential playoff push and just some shakeup in the rankings, I want Auburn to win this game. I mean, my head is telling me Georgia, my heart's telling me Auburn. I'm going to take the Tigers in this one in the upset. I think everything here just kind of sets up perfectly for Gus Malzahn and co. I mean, this is in Jordan Hare, so this feels like one of those games that could come down to the wire. Somehow Stidham pulls out some miracle throw, and they end up winning it by maybe a field goal or one possession. So.
Auburn is no stranger to big games.
No, not at
Gus
all.
Gus Malzahn, he's been able to do it for years, and I feel like this is no different.
We've seen Iron Bowl recently.
They are ready.
They're
ready to host the Bulldogs. I think this is going to be a tough, physical game fought in the trenches. Both schools are averaging 36 points a game, and Auburn's allowing 16, Georgia's allowing 11. So very similar when you look at the offense and the defense. I think these teams match up very well. I think this is going to be an instant classic, but I think at the end of the day, Auburn has the edge because this game's at home for them. So I think they're going to upset the Bulldogs.
Auburn's a little bit like Notre Dame. They love to run the ball. They have a decent quarterback. Georgia shut down Notre Dame rushing-wise, so I think they're going to replicate that and do the same thing to Auburn.
But that was a close game. And
it was. I think this game comes down to a field goal or a last possession kind of deal. Not so fast, my friend.
I think as well as Georgia's defense has been playing, the numbers show that Auburn's defense is playing just as well. I mean, their two losses are to two currently ranked teams. Obviously, a road loss at Clemson by one possession is nothing to be ashamed of, and LSU playing a lot better recently too. So two not so bad losses for Auburn. So I think this definitely increases their chances to win the SEC or sneak into the playoff if they
a must watch game though.
This
is a must watch game, and I know we'll be in the stadium for the Clemson Florida State game.
I will leave at halftime,
but we'll be watching the banner.
Lucky for us, they have the scores up top.
Yeah, we'll be watching the scores on the side.
Show some highlights on the jumbo.
Next game we got at 3:30. We have the Iowa Hawkeyes coming off their big win against Ohio State. They are traveling to Madison in what has turned into a huge game across the Big Ten. Who y'all have in this one?
Yeah, CBS and ABC are very close in the channel list, and you're going to like that because Georgia and Auburn play the exact same time as Iowa and Wisconsin. I think Iowa's going to have
screen it if you can.
Yeah, Iowa's going to have a little bit of a hangover, I feel like, after the Penn State game. That was the perfect game for them. It's going to be hard to get any better than what they did. Yeah. It benefited a lot from that home crowd. It was rocking down in Iowa City. I'm going to go with Wisconsin. They just always seem to get the job done. Paul Chryst knows exactly what it takes to win. Jonathan Taylor's healthy again. That's what they rely on. I think Wisconsin finds a way at home at Camp Randall to get the job done, but Iowa's a stingy team, and they're going to make it tough on them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be one of those classic Big Ten games that doesn't necessarily carry the entertainment factor. I mean, it's going to be cold weather. It's going to be old school, hard nosed, ground and pound football. That's the kind of program that both Kirk Ferentz and Paul Chryst like to run. So I think you're going to see a lot of rushing yards, and if you do see any passing yards, it's going to be on the Iowa side of the ball because Hornibrook as a quarterback is more of a liability than anything. If Wisconsin couldn't run the ball, they would have no business being ranked in the top 10 right now, and they probably wouldn't be. I think Iowa could suffer that hangover effect that you hate to see after a big win, such as their 31-point shellacking of Ohio State last week. But I think they could also be riding high. I think this could be kind of that motivation that they need maybe to carry out the rest of the year, finish strong, and finish at somewhere in like an 8-4, 7-3 kind of range. I think this is a huge game for Iowa. Again, I think the conditions of all this sets up perfectly for an upset. So I'm going to take the Hawkeyes. Just again, so we can silence the doubt of maybe putting Wisconsin in the playoff if they run the table and win the Big Ten. This would prevent them from doing so. So I think again, for the chaos that would ensue and the shakeup in the rankings, I would love for Iowa.
Well, I know
Bears feeling ballsy.
I know if Landon's watching.
I want all upsets this week except for the Clemson Florida State.
I know that if Landon's watching, I know he was on the show Tuesday, and you called into the show Tuesday. He's probably not too happy with that pick. I'm going to go with the Badgers because of the fact, and I think that Iowa will have a slight hangover because of how well they played last week. And Bradley, you touched on it. They really can't get any better than what they played. I feel like that's kind of they've maxed out their potential there. Maybe not. Maybe they're still riding high, like Evan mentioned. But I still think that because this game, it's going to be 37 degrees and raining at kickoff. It's going to be a cold, wet game. And if it is hard-nosed football, like you mentioned, I feel like the running attack of the Badgers will just continue to wear down the Hawkeyes. And even if Iowa was able to hang around for 2, 3, even going into the fourth quarter, I still think that constant ground and pound. I don't think you're going to need to throw the ball in this game.
No,
I don't think Wisconsin's going to need to rely on throwing the ball.
Jonathan Taylor should have a field.
If it's 37 degrees and raining, it's going to feel like a brick. So honestly, they're just going to hand the ball off to their slew of running backs, chew the clock up, score a few touchdowns. I think this game is wrapped up.
And that's kind of how Iowa was able to basically destroy Ohio State, was exposing their secondary and throwing the ball down the field, down the sidelines. And, that's not what they were able to do against Wisconsin, especially in the bad weather. So
right. I think this game lines up perfectly for Iowa to win it, and I would love for Iowa to win it. Now, obviously, the smarter choice is Wisconsin. They've got a better chance of winning this game. I think realistically they probably will, but like I said, for the sake of everything that would happen in the aftermath of Iowa winning, that's why I want them to win. So that's why I picked
Quickly, we'll move on. Going over to the Pac-12 now. This is a 4 p.m. kickoff. We've got the Trojans of USC traveling to Colorado. Y'all feel like this is a potential upset?
Last year, maybe. Not this year. I think Colorado just hasn't had the same magic that they did last year, kind of a little hangover effect. I think USC is starting to figure things out a little more. Sam Darnold's starting to limit his interceptions a little bit. Jones, their running back, 13 touchdowns. Not really much talk about him, but he's been a workhorse for them, so I'm going to go with USC.
Yeah, I think, we talk about how disappointing USC's been this year. Like, they were highly ranked to start the year, but they're 8-2 overall right now, which a lot of teams would pay to have that record right now. I think Darnold is starting to come into that form, playing like that first-round talent that we know he is, even though in his latest QB rankings, I believe Mel Kiper put Josh Rosen above Sam Darnold, so maybe that's a chip on Darnold's shoulder, not being the golden boy anymore. He's got twice as many touchdowns as he does interceptions, good numbers that you like to see there. I think he could sling it across the yard all day. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes for 350 and 4 touchdowns here. I think USC wins this one pretty easily.
I think USC, they've looked, they had an inconsistent offense for the first 8 weeks of the year, and they've really bounced back the last 2 weeks, scoring 48 and 49 points. Yes, they had the disappointing game at Notre Dame 3 weeks ago, but I feel like that's kind of a distant memory now. Colorado's lost 3 of their last 5. They were blanked by Washington State. I just haven't seen enough from the Buffaloes, even though they have a pretty good offense looking at the stats. They're averaging over 400 yards a game to be able to contend with USC for the entire game. So I think the Trojans get this one done pretty easily. Moving on, we will go ahead and touch on another Pac-12 matchup. We've got Washington State traveling to Utah.
Everyone's kind of forgot about Utah for good reason. They're now 2-4 in the Pac-12. They've dropped 4 out of the last 5. It's kind of that USC game that kind of slipped away from them and basically, wrecked the rest of their season. I'm going to go with Washington State. Luke Falk, they're gaining more confidence in him as the season goes along. Good win against Stanford last week against a really good defense for David Shaw. I think Washington State comes out with this one pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't think I have to remind y'all how much I love, the Cougars and Luke Falk and Mike Leach. So obviously, I'm going to pick Washington State in this game. It's going to be tough, though. I mean, they're only a 1-point favorite on the road right now. And again, Utah is one of those teams that I think, they're not quite on the brink of being one of those marquee teams, but they are good enough to play spoiler. And even though Washington State does have 2 losses already this year, so essentially eliminated from playoff contention, they're still playing for a solid postseason.
A lot left to play for.
Pac-12 championship appearance potentially, and one of those New Year's Six bowls. Yeah. So I think if they drop this game, that's going to be a good way to make it to the Poinsettia Bowl or whatever. Yeah. So I think Utah could play spoiler in this game. I don't think they will. I think Luke Falk has a field day, throws for 100 yards, a million yards, however many.
I think the Cougars' offense is going to show up in this one, and like you mentioned, they got Mike Leach as their coach, so that's pretty much all you need to know. Then I feel like this is kind of an under-the-radar game. Not too many people talking about it. Utah, like you said, is looking to play spoiler, but I think at the end of the day, Washington State's going to show up. They still have a lot left to play for, even though they have 2 losses. I think they'll be able to get it done.
I think the main thing for me with Utah is they're 1-4 in their last 5 games. The only win was last week against UCLA, which outside of Josh Rosen is terrible. So
I believe he was hurt too in that game, so he didn't even play.
Yeah, so exactly. Take that with a grain of salt. So that's why I think Washington State's just going to be too much in this one.
We got 5 games left. Can we do it in 5 minutes? Here's the big finish. Here we go. Game going back to the SEC. We've got Alabama number 2 on the road, Mississippi State.
Upset pick of the week. I'm taking Mississippi State.
Wow.
I think it's setting up perfectly. They have a dual threat quarterback. Fitzgerald has been great all year for Mississippi State. I think they've recovered a little bit from the Auburn game, the shocker 5 weeks ago. Bama just has not, outside of the games that they've beat up on inferior opponents, they didn't look very good against LSU, a team that was struggling all year. I think at home, Mississippi State, they're not ranked number 1 in the country. They don't have that pressure anymore on them like a couple years ago. I think it's going to sneak up on Bama. And, you talk about chaos. No one's talking about this game. I'm going to go Mississippi State.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. I think Mississippi State stands a really good chance of winning this game. It's in Stark Vegas. Nick Fitzgerald is an amazing dual threat quarterback, and we've seen Alabama, struggle with dual threat quarterbacks all the way back to the Tim Tebow days. So, this is one of those matchups, again, I think sets up perfectly for an upset. But I'm going to take Bama in this one. I think they got a chip on their shoulder with Georgia being number 1 the past couple weeks and people doubting them for not playing very good teams. I think they're going to come into Starkville. I wouldn't be surprised if they blow out.
They're only favored by 2 touchdowns, which I really find surprising. But I feel like that, like you said, they have something left to prove since they're ranked number 2. And if Georgia falters this week on the road at Auburn, Bama's the consensus number 1 once again. So I'm going to go Roll Tide. I think they get it done by at least 3 touchdowns.
Oh, see, I think it could be close.
I think they're going to.
I think the potential for Alabama to blow them out is there, but I don't think it happens. I think Nick Fitzgerald's going to play really well in this game, so I think they'll keep it close. But I still think Bama pulls it out.
Moving on really quickly, we've got 4 games left. This one we may not have to touch on for too long. We got Purdue on the road, number 25, Northwestern.
The team that needs this win the most is not even Northwestern, it's Wisconsin. Wisconsin needs Northwestern to keep winning if they want to have a top 25 win underneath their belt. And I think Northwestern does them the favor of winning this game. I think the Wildcats go to 7-3. Great for Pat Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I think Northwestern, has been playing really well. Obviously, that triple overtime win against Michigan State at home helps the resume a little bit. I think, again, this is something that could set up for Purdue to upset. I think Purdue has the capability to upset. I'll take Northwestern, but I'm not extremely confident in that pick, mostly because I don't know too much about either team. But I think the potential for Purdue to win this game and essentially play somewhat of a spoiler for Wisconsin is there. So it's a 50-50 for me. I'll take Northwestern.
This game's at home for Northwestern. That's why I'm going with the Wildcats. Thorson hasn't really the Northwestern quarterback really hasn't looked that good this year. He's thrown more interceptions than touchtsdowns. He's thrown 11 picks to 10 TDs. But I still feel
he played really well in that Michigan State game. I caught the end of that.
He did.
And
they looking at the stats, the teams are pretty similar in points per game and then points allowed. But I still feel like because this game's at home, Northwestern will get it done, and it will be a big win for Wisconsin. We've got a few more games now. We're going to go into another marquee matchup this weekend on ABC at 8 p.m. Notre Dame Fighting Irish taking on the U at Miami.
I'm going to go with the Catholics over the Convicts here. I think after watching last week, as well as Miami did play with the turnover chain and all that going for him, Rozier had 3 turnovers in the first half. I think Notre Dame's too good of a team for you to do that against. I think he's been just too inconsistent for me to trust him to take down a team like Notre Dame. I think their running attack's just going to be too much for Miami. The talent across the board for Notre Dame, I got the Irish moving on.
Yeah, I think that's probably the smart pick too. I think Miami's kind of in that situation that Clemson was 2 years ago when we made it to the national championship. You knew we were going to be good, but we weren't supposed to be that good that quickly. I think with the hiring of Mark Richt, you knew the Hurricanes were going to come back to a certain extent. Obviously, nothing like they were in the early 2000s, but you knew they were going to be good. I think it's still a little too early for them to be that good. Obviously, this is going to set it better for Clemson if Miami does win, because ultimately you face them in the ACC championship game. 2-loss non-ACC champion, not going to get into the playoffs. So this helps Clemson if Miami wins, but I think Notre Dame and Josh Adams with that running attack is going to be too much for the Hurricanes and that turnover chain. So I'll take Notre Dame as well.
Going with the Irish I'm going with the
Are
U,
you
baby.
surprised?
I'm going with the U. This game's at home. Miami's played well all year. They've beaten all their opponents. I know that Notre Dame dropped that one game to Georgia by a point, and we've talked about this on so many occasions about whether Miami is legitimate. I feel like this is the Canes' almost coming out party. This is probably the biggest non-conference. Well, this is the biggest. I guess it is the biggest non-conference game for Miami in several years because they're finally relevant again. Notre Dame is in the top 4. Both teams have playoff potential, and I think Mark Richt is ready to show the college football world that Miami is for real.
Let's be honest here. Oh, continue.
Well, I was just going to say, yes, Notre Dame's offense has looked better at times, and Miami has looked lackluster against inferior opponents, but I still feel like the Hurricanes are going to be able to get this one done.
Does Miami even need to win this game to make the college football playoff? If they lose,
they need it for credibility. They need this win
good.
for credibility.
I mean, if they beat Clemson later on, it's gonna be hard.
I would think they don't necessarily need this game. I could see this turning into a shootout, though.
But if you beat Virginia Tech and Notre Dame back-to-back weeks,
if they win, that's
it doesn't hurt them by winning this.
Yeah. I mean, it only continues.
I think they could easily
to boost
survive.
their
They
resume.
can lose and still make it in.
Well,
especially if it's close.
Another top 10 matchup to talk about. This one's on Fox at 8. So many games, good games late in the evening. We got TCU number 6 on the road at number 5, Oklahoma.
I've gone back and forth with this game all week. I've been TCU one day, Oklahoma the next. To me, it just comes down to Baker Mayfield in the clutch, coming down to the road at home. I just think he's going to find a way to get it done. TCU, they've been a little bit shaky the last couple weeks. Kenny Hill's hard to trust, and they just score too many points for Oklahoma. I'm going to go with them.
You're going with the Horned Frogs?
I'm going with Oklahoma.
You're going with Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Okay. I thought you were hyping up Kenny Thrill and TCU.
No.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm gonna take Oklahoma as well. I think this game sets up really well for them. Being at home, coming off pretty big emotional win in Bedlam against the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. Baker Mayfield played really, really well in that game, and he played really, really well in the Red River rivalry, and they beat Texas. Probably wouldn't have won that game with the way they played without Baker. So I think, again, this game's going to rest on his shoulders. If he plays well, Oklahoma's going to win at home. I don't really see Oklahoma dropping this game. This game, essentially a college football playoff quarterfinal.
Yeah,
winner of this
100%.
controls their own destiny throughout the rest of the Big 12. So I think this is obviously a must-win for both teams. I think Oklahoma gets the job
I
done.
decided on this game before the show started, and I think I might change my mind. Looking at the Horned Frogs in Oklahoma, both are great on the offensive side of the ball. Oklahoma especially, they're averaging over 600 yards a game.
That's what a Big 12 defense will do for you.
At 434. But here's the thing about that Big 12 defense that you just mentioned for TCU. In the last 4 weeks, they've given up 20 points. Kansas State, Kansas. I mean, that was a blank.
Basketball school.
Iowa State and then Texas. They held Iowa State and Texas to 7 apiece. So I'm really impressed with the Horned Frogs defense the last 4 weeks. And if you look at Oklahoma, they gave up 52 to Oklahoma State, 27 to Texas Tech, 35 to Kansas State. TCU only gave up 6, and then they gave up 24 to Texas, who TCU held to 7. So for those reasons, on the defensive side of the ball, I know of all things in the Big 12, I'm going with the Horned Frogs.
I don't think they can just keep up with them scoring wise.
I think
they will.
Offense is too
They're
much.
going to run out of
The
chances at the end.
is.
Yeah, but I'm going to go Horned Frogs.
Last game before we go.
Most important game of the week.
This is the most important game of the week. The D3 matchup of the week, the Mount Newton Purple Raiders.
Let's go,
If you watched
Purple
last
Raiders.
show, he was high.
Undefeated.
They're going on the road to University Heights, Ohio to take on John Carroll, who is 6-3.
Oh, they're winning this game by 30.
Mount Newton has scored 50 points in every single one of their games so far this year. Do you think they keep the trend up?
52-20.
52.
Who's their opponent?
Bet
Who are
the
they
over.
playing?
Actually, no, they scored 43 against Ohio Northern.
Yeah, that was their worst game. 43-14. That was the most points they gave up and the fewest points they scored, and they still won by 20.
If I had a Purple Raiders head, I would put it on right now. I'm going to go with them. On the road, they close it out 10-0. Only a 10-game season. That's D3 for you.
Well,
Mount Union
they got
takes the
playoffs.
dub.
To close with a real game, we're going to touch on Clemson's Florida State pretty briefly.
Oh, yeah, we got that.
Yeah, this
Oh,
one
yeah.
is at home for the Tigers, and like Dabo said in his press conference on Tuesday, this game has the implications of the game have not changed for Clemson. The winner of this game, if Clemson wins this game, they get to the ACC championship. So on their side, it hasn't changed. Now, Florida State, yes, with the fact that they're struggling for bowl eligibility, but for Clemson, they win this game, they're in the ACC championship. They lose this game, they're out.
Yeah, something just to keep in mind. I mean, although Clemson did get a great win last week against NC State, the defense was pretty suspect at times. They had a couple instances where NC State was able to just drive down the field at will. Florida State has been a pretty solid defensive team all season. It's just the offense that's kind of been not been able to catch up. I think it's going to be a little closer just because, one, it's a rivalry game. Two, Florida State's got nothing to lose. Clemson's got everything to lose in this one. So I think it's going to be maybe low 30s. I think I'm going to pick Clemson. We'll go 33-20. I think it's going to be interesting, though, to see how if James Blackman can keep it in. And I think Clemson's going to come out victorious.
Yeah, I think this is a game.
Score prediction. Real quick, score prediction.
33-20.
Yeah, I think this is a game that Clemson fans and players and coaches alike had circled on their calendar before the season started. And for those that circled in pencil, I think they went back and erased it. Obviously, nobody thought Florida State was going to be 3-5 at this point and going to miss a bowl game. We're going to see the Orange Breeches in this game playing for the ACC Atlantic Crown. So obviously, again, a must-win for Clemson. I think Florida State has been very inconsistent this year. Like Dabo said, they don't know what Florida State they're going to get, so I think that could play a huge role in the final score. Something to point out, though, that I think is kind of interesting. Florida State beat Syracuse last week by the same exact score in which Clemson lost to Syracuse, 27-24. So for what that's worth. But I think our boys get the job done in Death Valley this Saturday. I could definitely see the potential for it being close. I'm hoping that it's not, but with the way our offense has been a little bit inconsistent, especially with Kelly Bryant, is he healthy? Is he not? Is he going to throw an interception? Is he going to run the ball? I think all that is going to lead to Clemson winning this game by maybe 14 to 17 points. I think your score prediction is pretty good. I'll say 34-17. I think our defense will play a little bit better than they did against NC State.
I think it was Bradley who made the point. Clemson has everything to lose. Florida State has nothing to lose because they're essentially playing for a bowl game. I think the Seminoles are going to show up, and they're going to show out for this one. They really want to beat the Tigers. They really want to ruin their season. Like you said, Clemson has played well in big games with Virginia Tech and the other big game that we've played. What was Louisville on the road. So we've played well in big games. I'm hoping that the Tigers don't sleep on the Seminoles and think that they're just going to waltz out there and roll them over, because that's definitely not going to happen. Even with a banged up and deflated Florida State team, you're still going to have to compete for all 4 quarters. I do think, though, that since Florida State is averaging under 20 points a game, they're not going to be able to keep up offensively. But I do see this one going into the 4th quarter. I think it'll be tight, and I think it's going to come down to a field goal. I think it might be a kicking showdown, 24-21.
Aguayo's not a bad kicker, so I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to come down to that.
I think it's going to be close.
I think the only way Florida State wins this game is if they score 2 or more